If you could start that. Thank you very much for the reminder. Thank you. So this is the Pacifico Affordable Housing Project Neighborhood Virtual Meeting, December 1st, 2021. And we are scheduled to be here for a couple of hours, 7 to 9. We greatly appreciate your time being here. We want to respect that. So we will end promptly at 9 so that everybody has some time to rest up, right? And I know that it's going to fly by. So we have, we're going to go through the agenda in just a minute to give you an idea of what the meeting is going to flow like. I do want to acknowledge some folks who have joined us here who are public officials that you may already know. Councilmember Josh Chapman and Mayor Gloria Partida. Who else am I not seeing? I think Supervisor Provenza was to join us, but I don't see him. He may be joining us later. And Tracy, you still have your hand up. Is that from before? Or did you have another question? You have another question? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting you
No,
again.
that's okay.
I requested the agenda and we still have not received the agenda. Generally, that's distributed at least 24 hours prior to the meeting, so we have an opportunity to prepare. We have been given nothing, and nor the format of the meeting. So can we have an agenda?
Absolutely. That's where we're going next. So we're going next there. I want to also clarify from the beginning, this is not a public hearing. This is not a debate. This is not a council meeting or a commission hearing. This is more than anything, a listening session. So it may look very different from the meetings that the city may have hosted in the past. It is a listening session. I want to first of all introduce myself, who is talking at you here. My name is Elvia Garcia, and I'm the lead facilitator for this particular project. I'm a mediator and facilitator with YOLO Conflict Resolution Center. We're a nonprofit organization here in Yolo County, providing services throughout the region, actually. We do mediation, facilitation, conflict resolution training, and restorative justice services. And I'm joined by my colleagues who are also facilitators. Carol Hunter, our executive director, is here helping us out as a facilitator. And Hazel Critchfield, who's also a mediator and facilitator and staff member with the agency. So this is the team of facilitators that will be leading the discussion tonight. And without further ado, let's take a look at the agenda so that we all know kind of what the evening will be like. So I'm going to screen share that. Can everyone see that? Okay. So we're here with the opening and welcome. The purpose of this meeting, again, as I said, is a listening session, basically, to hear concerns about the Pacifico project and the Calworks project that's being proposed. So we're going to just review the agenda now and then give you a sense of the process. We're going to have a brief presentation by Diane Paro, the Director of Community Engagement with the City of Davis, who will provide some basic facts about the project. And then we will go into breakout room conversations. For the breakout rooms, we will have some specific ground rules, which we'll share in just a minute. And then we're going to have 3 different prompts to guide the discussion. And then we're going to come back and do what we call harvesting. We're going to share with the group what the major themes and topics were that came up, or questions or concerns, the answers to some of these questions. And then we're going to talk about next steps. So as you can see, this is very different from a typical commission meeting or a council meeting. And we hope that what happens here is that we have an opportunity to listen to each other, to listen to ourselves, to inquire about the project or any other concerns surrounding that. And then also come up with what could happen to make things better, or what about the proposed changes could make things better? A proposed project would make things better. So that's our agenda. So it's quite simple. And let me just take a couple of questions here briefly. Matt, and then Eric. Matthew, is it Matthew?
I want to be equitable about things, and Eric had his hand up first. So why don't you go ahead, Eric?
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I just, to Tracy's point about the agenda, first off, I just want to say thank you for posting this. I think the form's great. I like this informal setup that you got. I think it's fantastic. Just circulating around this agenda, it's pretty simple. And I think it's a great path forward for us. If we could have had that on the flyer or explained in advance, that would just be, I'm not criticizing at all. Again, I'm more thankful. I just think going forward for these types of meetings, it would just be appreciated if we could see this earlier. No scrutiny whatsoever.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Matthew?
I'm not going to be quite as positive as Eric. I appreciate the agenda. I appreciate the firepower that you brought with you for conflict resolution. My desire, and something that I asked for before the holidays, was to co-create an agenda with this group, and that we would have some representation as a community group to co-create the agenda. And that this isn't just an extractive process where the city is coming to learn what our specific concerns are, and then they can take them back and do the calculus and address those things. For me, we're already starting out of the gate with 1 foot tied behind our back. And I don't think it's not, in my mind, off to a good start. It doesn't feel like an actual listening session to me that's listening on all grounds. And so I just want to sort of go on record that that if we really want to have stakeholder participation and who's affected in the community all the way around, then there needs to be some co-creation process, maybe a little less emphasis on conflict resolution and a little more emphasis on actual solution orientated discussions.
Okay, I hear your concern.
Solutions, not just listening to problems. I think we've done a lot of listening to problems.
Okay.
And I don't think that that's necessarily going to be productive. I think what would be helpful is if the city comes prepared with some answers to some questions about the systemic problems that they are facing.
Okay, Matt, I'm gonna cut you off, Matthew, because that is actually one of the topics in the discussion groups on question number 3 in one of our rounds. So I would invite you to share that again so that we are going to be documenting all the concerns and issues that come up. We are being paired up with a recorder in each group so that we're keeping track of all the comments and issues. And I hear your concern in terms of the lack of co-creation of the agenda or the meeting. This is not necessarily an exhaustive process. This is your meeting. You can choose to say what you want, not say what you don't want. We have some prompts, but we want to make sure that there is some kind of structure to it so that everybody feels safe to express their concerns. What I'm saying is that at the third question in our breakout groups, that would be a perfect time to bring this up so that it's noted and that it can have an impact on future meetings and processes. Okay, so I don't want to go back and say it should have been done this way. I think what we have tonight is what we have tonight, and we can modify it slightly, and then you have some choices within that format. But I totally understand that it feels like the agenda is just presented to you and you've had no say in creating it.
Well, that's the way it is. I mean,
it doesn't just feel that way.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Because it's not a meeting that was co-created. You are absolutely right. It's a meeting that has been convened by the city officials. And we have been brought in to
Got your
facilitate.
moments in here for divide and conquer to separate us with the questions so that we don't get the group all riled up with our questions. Like it's
Matthew,
silly.
I'm gonna stop you again because there are some, I respect your opinion, but I want you to make sure that you're sharing that in the group. We're not in that point of our meeting yet. If you could give this a chance, and let's check in at the end and see how that feels. And let's make sure that your suggestions for future meetings are tracked. Let me go ahead and go to Tim, because I see your hand up, Tim. Tim, are you there? Can you hear me?
Me back. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes,
What's your question?
I would agree with Matt. My original point, however, in getting on was, why would we need to break out? I would prefer to have the whole group here, and I would like to hear everybody's comments. And I don't think breaking out is appropriate here. So I would propose that we all are able to hear everybody's comments, as that would be helpful to everybody.
We might need 4 hours for that. That's one of the reasons.
Well,
And
perhaps
we
we can
only
split
have-
it into another
We
meeting.
only have 2 hours tonight. If you want to suggest that there be a follow-up meeting or a second meeting or a third meeting, that's a possibility.
I suggest that. I think it's important that we hear everybody's comments, and I am not a fan of this breakout room session where I don't get to hear other people's thoughts on this.
Okay, well, let me point something out too. You will get to hear other people's thoughts, not directly from them. But what happens after the breakout rooms is that we come back and we report out the themes and the topics and the comments and the concerns that were raised during the small group discussions. And everything that was shared is recorded by the recorder as well.
Okay,
So
fair
I
enough.
see what
But I
you're
still
saying. You're
think,
not hearing from everyone, but you are hearing a summary of the main topics and concerns.
I would just note that if it needs a follow-up meeting, or certainly for future meetings, I think it's far more beneficial to hear from the actual speaker and not just to get a summary. So that'd be my comment.
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
Madam, if I may. I will raise my hand.
Yes. Can you identify yourself, please?
My name is Peter.
Hi, Peter.
I live in Pacifico. For me, myself, and I received a postcard saying that there was, I was given a postcard that this meeting was going to happen. It was going to start at 7 o'clock. So when I called the number to RSVP and get the link, I talked with Christina, and at one point I asked her how long was this meeting going to be. And she was quite certain it was going to be an hour.
Oh.
So now I hear this meeting is proposed to be 2 hours, that there's an agenda, that there are breaking into groups, when the postcard and what Christina implied to me was this was going to be a relatively short meeting with people sharing thoughts and nothing more. So I plan on sticking this out till 9 o'clock, but I did have other plans for tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have liked that Christina would have told me more than just that it was going to be an hour, and that there would have been more information, so I would have a larger idea. Again, I cannot emphasize enough that I thought this was just going to be a meeting, a Zoom meeting, a bunch of people together, not half the city of Davis or even a quarter, but a handful that we're going to talk back and forth.
I understand, Peter, and I'm sorry that you didn't get the correct information about the meeting, and I hope you're able to stay with us.
Well, I'm going to say, but still, I will be doing so like some of the other gentlemen that have spoken with not the greatest of enthusiasm. Because this is going to be definitely more than an hour.
Right, it's planned to go for 2 hours.
Yes, you've made that clear, madam.
Right.
It is 2 hours, which is more than I was told. will be here.
Thank you,
Sure.
Peter. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I see someone named Neighbor. If you could rename yourself, that would be great, so we know how to address you.
Well,
As-
my name is Jacqueline, and my old tablet won't allow me to rename myself.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. It is
Okay.
old technology.
Okay.
I want to thank you for the tone and kind of reiterating in a positive manner. So that's appreciated. I want to reiterate and support what I've heard from Tracy about the importance of having an agenda in advance. I personally have been requesting information to find out about when upcoming meetings and requesting additional information. So I too feel like the opportunity to co-create, I believe I even used that word, the opportunity to prepare in advance, that all of those things have been requested multiple times. And so sorry about my image being so bad. So I wanted to just have that be heard from multiple people. I also didn't know it was going to be 2 hours. I will stick it out. The amount of information provided in advance was very cryptic. And so, you know, the message that we've been speaking about as a community has been really trying to work towards a collaborative environment. And so I think there's been a lot of hope that there would be a collaborative environment. And I think what you're hearing are a repeat of feeling like we've been asking for things specifically and not getting what we've been asking for. And I actually really strongly feel that what Tim said is absolutely correct. Dividing us, I think, is absolutely inappropriate. And because we are a community and we are speaking up saying that we don't want to be divided, maybe we take a vote or maybe we schedule a second meeting. But I want to hear what my neighbors have to say. I want to hear it first from them. And I do not want to be divided up.
You would not like to go into breakout rooms.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. And so it feels like we're dividing you up for some other motive or something else. I'm sure that all of you have heard each other's concerns before. And
we are
maybe
all
heard other
developing the
people's
ideas
concerns.
together. I mean, it's
Right.
really a cohesive group. It's a very supportive organization. And I think that as we go through the process, we help each other clarify thoughts. But we all have our own experiences and expertise, and we support each other. So I think that by pulling us apart, we feel like we're losing that support of the neighborhood that we have. And none of us have the full picture, but we do rely on each other to help each other out. And so I want to hear firsthand because, you know, it's like telephone game. Even though you'll capture important things, it can never be the same as the nuance that comes from when people speak and you get to see their facial reactions. I do appreciate how you spoke about imagining a circle. And I will be going on and off. I have some things to attend to with the family, but I will be here attentive. So I really feel strongly that we should stay together as a community. We have been supporting each other for years as a community, and pulling us apart, it has so many underlying ramifications that won't support the process that I think we all really are hopeful for, that we can start an opportunity. It's been challenging. It's been challenging, and you're going to hear the frustration, but I've been hearing hope. I've been hearing hope, and I've been hearing the opportunity to co-create. And I think that the first step doing that is listening to what the neighbors are asking for, which is that we can stay together and work together and hear each other's voices.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I appreciate your feedback. And in no way is breaking up into groups an attempt to divide you. This is a typical World Cafe process that we've used in many, many meetings, where people have more of an opportunity to speak from their heart, honestly, in a smaller group before it is shared with a larger group. And
would we have the opportunity to choose then who we are in a group with, so that we have the opportunity to at least know that there are members that we have been speaking with so we can be together.
We just randomly put you into groups, and it is
Right,
actually
I'm saying
most
that's what we
important.
don't want.
It is
okay.
actually most
It's not okay.
important that you're in a group with people you know the least. Those are the
So
people you want to
I think we have all agreed to be here, but I don't think we're agreeing to the format. And so
Okay.
I think that I mean, you can put it to a vote, but I think that I'm hearing some of my other neighbors, I'll take my hand down since I've been speaking. I'm hearing from my other neighbors that they feel the same way. And so this is a process that we intend to co-create, and we're speaking up clearly saying, let us talk, let us work with your process, but let us stay as a group where we can all speak and hear each other.
Okay, I hear you, Jacqueline. Let me let's stay on this theme for a little bit longer, just because I see all these hands going up. And we want to make sure and address that before we plow through, and that we make a decision that's going to be of benefit to everyone. So let me check in with, sorry, I'm not seeing everyone at the same time here. I don't see your name.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you please send the agenda so I have an agenda to look at?
I will try to do that right now. Let me do one thing at a time. Can I get some help with the hands? Kara or Hazel, can you help me track the hands that are up, please?
Yeah, I was kind of tracking, I think, who was putting their hands up. I think Tracy, you were next. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Was that?
Thank you. I did have something else to add. I would like to agree that I do not want to go into a group. I think that I would like to hear directly from the individuals, simply based on experience with staff, where they have absolutely said the exact opposite. And that is in city staff reports.
Okay.
So I do not feel that breakout groups are a mutually beneficial in any way.
Okay, thank you, Tracy.
And if
Thank you
that
for that comment.
requires multiple meetings, then I'm in favor of that.
Okay, and maybe we'll make some of those decisions tonight. Thank you for that input. Matthew? Did you have another comment, or is that?
I do.
And then Ellen had her hand up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay.
I think Ellen was before me. So
I think Ellen has had her hand up.
Oh, forgive me. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm raising my hand out of frustration. It is now 7:30. My fellow neighbors have talked so much that I really feel like we're not getting to the base of this. If we're going to continue talking this way, I think that each person needs a time limit. I am concerned that if we don't go into breakout groups, people like myself will not be heard. If we definitely choose to be one large group, then there has to be a time limit, because I hear people going around in circles. The people who've been speaking, they say the same thing again and again. Say your thing, move on. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. I think then we had Britt had their hand up.
Oh.
Yes, yeah, thanks very much. And thanks for trying to corral the meeting as best you all can. I share the concerns of those who've spoken, maybe with exception of the last person, about the breaking out into groups and about the lack of an agenda. And particularly, I just wanted to sort of emphasize something that Matt said and maybe put it in a different way. And that is, and you don't know this, you're new to the process and this is not your fault, but there, as you can sort of probably gather, there is a long history here of lack of trust in the city of Davis and in Yolo County, fueled by their not being honest and not bad management and lack of communication throughout this process. And one of the things I'd like to hear, and it's not from you, I'd like to hear it from the city officials who are participating, and maybe the county official too, is what, you mentioned, in your agenda that at the end of this, we'll sort of decide what we're going to do. But I'd like to hear before we start a commitment that to a collaborative process that Matt talked about, to a process that thoroughly involves the neighbors and others in coming up with what is the right use of that property, a commitment to not moving forward with any new projects there and not even keeping what's there, depending on the outcome of that process, to make sure we're not just all spinning our wheels here. Because in the past, we've been sort of fobbed off and they've thrown things at us and it never really then they just moved on to the next thing, right? And so I'd really like to hear from them before we even go any further. You know, what are they committed to in this process?
Okay, thank you, Britt.
Yeah, did I see any other hands up before?
I still have my hand up.
Was that you, Matthew?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. Well, I'd like to echo the sentiments of most of my neighbors about not wanting to be split up. I realize that this is a technique for conflict resolution, but I think that we don't necessarily need to be doing conflict resolution here. I think what we need, if we are focused on co-creation, then that's actually even a better track for us to go on. Ellen, you mentioned that you wouldn't be heard unless you were in a breakout group, but I heard you loud and clear. And I appreciate the fact that you don't want people saying the same thing over and over. And in fact, I think the reason that many of us are upset is because we wouldn't be saying the same thing over and over if we had the opportunity to co-create the agenda from the first place. Okay. And that's part of the problem, okay?
Thank you, Matt.
So I think now,
thank you.
Here we are in the middle of this meeting, and we are saying, let's co-create this meeting together, and we don't want to be split up. And maybe we should practice democratic values and put it to a vote and honor the democracy that we're actually in and use the same tools that we value.
Okay, so thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Let me clarify one thing. This is not a conflict resolution process that we're engaged in. This is a facilitation for purposes of learning information, hearing each other. There is no underlying agenda to resolve any conflict. If it happens, it happens. The major objective of this process is that we have an opportunity to listen, to understand, to ask questions, to clarify our own understanding. So that is the purpose of it. This is not a conflict resolution process that we're engaged in. I just wanted to make sure and clarify that. So one of the things that we can do, let's stop now because it is 7:33. I would propose this. Let's spend the rest of this meeting, because it may take that long, co-creating that agenda that you would like to see. If that is a possibility, it needs to happen with collaboration. It needs to happen with the ground rules that we have intended to use for the breakout rooms. And it needs to happen with all of us taking responsibility for making sure that everyone has a say, that there's equity in our listening and in our speaking. But if that is what is missing, this collaborative effort of co-creating, let's co-create the agenda now. You can decide when you want to hold that meeting. I don't think we can do both things tonight. So let me I guess, get a sense of the group. Thumbs up, not so sure, not at all in agreement.
You've taken away our ability to give you thumbs up and everything because of the parental controls that you've got on the meeting, where we can't chat and we can't give a thumbs up, we can't applaud, we can't send a group to the message. And when I'm co-creating with a group in teams, when we're doing a vision quest, and in fact, I'm on a vision quest right now with the team of executives, all of these things are in play because we're all creating something together, and there's not this parental overtone of needing to monitor the group.
Okay, so it feels like a parental oversight by limiting your ability to use some of the Zoom functions. Is that what you're saying?
The Zoom functions, the breakout rooms, like it's all a controlling kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay. I understand how it feels that way. Okay, so that's not our intent. So I apologize if it feels that way. That's not our intent.
Elvia, just some feedback for you here. You introduced you said this isn't a conflict resolution process.
That's
you
right.
Introduced yourself as from your title in where you asked Jacqueline to rename herself. You highlighted there that you're from the YOLO Conflict Resolution Center.
That's correct.
You highlighted your colleagues from the Conflict Resolution Center.
Yes.
If you introduced yourself, I'm fine with being mediated. That's completely acceptable. But to come out of the gate, it sets the wrong tone. We're here to be collaborative. If you're a collaborative mediator, fantastic.
I'm
Don't
here
care
as a
where
facilitator,
organization you're
Eric.
from. I thought,
I'm here
okay,
as a facilitator.
you might have said mediator, but I may have chosen the wrong word there. Collaborative facilitator, that's fine. But you introduced yourself from the Conflict Resolution Center
Okay.
out of the gate.
Because
Just
that's the
feedback.
agency, that is the agency that I work for. That is the title and the name of the agency, as we are
It's the wrong tone.
incorporated, whether or not
It's just
it
the wrong
is
tone.
accurate.
Fine.
Yeah. So really, what are we trying to do here? It's really up to you. Do you want to talk about everything that hasn't worked? Or do you want to put an agenda together for what you want to see work? What would you like to do?
There's a couple hands up.
Olga and then Jacqueline. Olga? Olga, we see your hand up. There you go. Go ahead. Can you hear me, Olga? There you are. Go ahead, Olga. What's your question? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, Olga, we still can't hear you. I'm so sorry, we can't hear you, Olga. Maybe we can come back. We'll come back to Olga. Jacqueline, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to ask the question. There was a brief mention of a presentation, and I know that the information, there was actually an allusion that there would be information that would be delivered tonight. And so when asking about what would we like to do next, I would like to know what information has been prepared to present. There was a series of questions that were very data specific that I know that the city was preparing for. I would hate for us to lose the opportunity for us to learn, to have an informed conversation. If I were to imagine something, and I would open it up to everybody, would be to hear the presentation. And then I think naturally from that, at the point where a breakout would occur, one of two things would happen. One, there might be a series of questions of things that went unanswered that people within the community still want to have answers to before we could have an intelligible conversation. Or we have enough information that as a whole group, we could answer your three, I don't remember how many questions, but you had some questions. And so then we could from there see what would be the appropriate next step. For myself, I would like to know the details, because to have a data-driven conversation would be beneficial.
Okay, Jacqueline, so you would like to have as part of the agenda, the presentation, so you know what information was going to be presented tonight.
No, I'm saying not a part of a future agenda. We are here. We have taken time out of our, and so that, so for tonight, okay.
For tonight,
So,
you would like to have that happen tonight, to hear that information that was prepared to be delivered today. Is that right?
I would appreciate that. I would be open to hearing other ideas from the community and could be swayed, but that would be my first thought.
+1 for a data-driven
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
+1, thumbs up.
So I hear other agreements. I see Tracy's hand up.
I'm still waiting for my agenda. Can you please send the agenda?
Yeah, I've asked that to be. It was just sent out, so check your inbox.
Yes, I did check my inbox. I've checked all of my inboxes. I'll continue to check. I have counted at least 10 city staff on this meeting call, and I just don't understand why I haven't received the agenda.
Please check again. You should have it.
Thank you. I should have had it at least 24 hours ago.
Understood. Tim?
Did only Tracy get that?
No, it should have been sent out to everyone.
I think I was just going to try to do
mine
thumbs
came
up,
in at
but I couldn't find it. So I don't have a question, but I agree with what Jacqueline said, actually.
To continue with the presentation and then decide what's next. Is that what you're saying?
I think that'd be at least a productive way to get this meeting off the ground. To hear what the city is contemplating and where we are currently at this stage.
Well, I think the intent of the presentation was to provide some basic facts so everybody's on the same page, the same starting point. For people who have heard it before, you probably have heard some of it before, and others who are hearing information for the first time, so that everybody's starting at the same state. So it may or may not be new information, but I understand what you're saying about wanting to hear it. Let's see, Barbara.
Hi, yes, hi. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I also agree. I would like to hear a presentation. I'd really, maybe I'm a little behind what some other people know, but I would like to know what the status is of, where things are in a process as far as how to use that land and buildings. And then we can formulate hopefully some other questions as well as we go along and hopefully work together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Have I missed any hands? Britt, did you have your hand up again, or is that from before?
No, I put it up again. Thank you. So I also agree with Jacqueline's comments. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think some of the questions that you've identified are good questions, but I think there's what I would argue is that, from my view, the more fundamental question, and this is where I do think it would be good to hear from the city officials first, which is, to me, the fundamental question is, what is the appropriate use of that property? And for this to be a meaningful process, there has to be an openness on the part of the city to working collaboratively with this group and others to come up with an idea of what the appropriate use is, wherever that may take us. And it takes us to, something that's not there now, that's not, 100 units of low-income housing, or that it should all be on the table in terms of what the appropriate use of that property is. And so I think it's really important to hear that either now at the start of the process or after the presentation of the facts, because that to me is whether this is a meaningful process or not, or it's just another effort to derail us from our concerns about that property.
So Britt, you have you want to see a wider discussion of the appropriate use of that property overall, not just this particular project. And you said you want to work collaboratively with the city officials and staff, right? That's kind of priorities for you. And you want to hear from them. So I know that this meeting, that, as I said at the beginning, the main purpose of this meeting was for them to hear from you, to really understand your concerns. So that's the purpose of it, not the other way around. You may or may not know where they stand, but their role as public officials, as we understand it, was for us to facilitate a process that would help them really listen to your concerns in these 3 different areas. I see your hand, Matthew. I'll be right with you. So the other thing and you may not have an answer to this right now, Britt, but you might want to think about, what does working collaboratively with this group look like and sound like? Because I know that this is not a new issue to most of you, right? So you've been dealing with this for a while. So what could change that would make it feel and look and sound collaborative, right? So that's kind of a focus of it.
And I think the short answer to that is that the city would actually be collaborative as opposed to playing these games. And I think sounds like it's just another game.
What would that look like or sound like?
So I think Matt talked about this in a previous meeting where a discussion with the mayor and with our councilman about the idea of a fully collaborative process, almost a task force that involves representatives of the neighborhood. Matt can weigh in on this, representatives of others who have an interest in this, city staff, city attorney, planning, all those officials who have a role in this, and so that we can all understand what the legal restrictions and frameworks are realistically, not these sort of things they throw out that we know aren't true, but what really is the case. And we can all work together to come to something that satisfies our needs about what the use of that property is, and it's done in a sort of almost a task force way. Again, Matt, you can talk about it better than I can, but I think that was.
Yeah, Britt, I think I hear what you're saying, and this is an attempt to do that, but it's not the whole shebang. This is an attempt to identify those needs. What are those needs? That's why they wanted to hear from you.
I think they know.
You think
I
they
know it's not your fault.
Yeah, and
they know what our concerns are.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is I've identified 2 agenda items. One is the information that staff was to provide. 2 is design a collaborative process. That maybe that's too loosely worded, but just the idea. So let me go to Matthew next.
Thanks. Yeah, I heartily second this idea of a data-driven conversation. And frankly, I think the data needs to be about not just the housing situation at Pacifico, but the larger housing problem that the city is facing. What do the flows look like of people in the various stages of housing? Those kinds of things. Britt and I have had conversations like that. We've started in our group, our email group, a list for various types of metrics where we could show success. I would think that Mayor Partita and Supervisor Provenza and Council Member Chapman, it would be in their political best interest to say, how can we produce a complex here that is an award-winning place that addresses homelessness, that the neighbors are happy, that everybody is, that this is an award-winning facility. And right now, we're not looking at things like that. We're looking at things like, how do we, prevent the damage, right? So I think we need to shift our focus. And I would like to see this collaborative process, not just about data, but actually about brainstorming together. What's possible, right? We haven't done anything like that, partially because everybody's assumed a defensive posture. And coming into this meeting, to the point Eric made earlier, that this idea that this is a conflict resolution meeting doesn't do anything to advance the agenda of saying, how can we create an award-winning facility? That's what I want. I have the longest fence line with that place. I want an award-winning facility next door to me. I think the mayor wants to be able to brag about an award-winning facility at that place. I think Supervisor Provenza would also like the same thing. Why not, right? Let's do that. But simply trying to push things places and saying we're doing a listening session, and we've done too many freaking listening sessions. It's over. It's time to start rolling up our sleeves and getting to work.
So it sounds like you feel you've listened and talked enough. You want to get to specifics of what could happen. To that third question of what changes could happen, or what would happen to address these concerns. The data is the one piece. The process is the other thing, because that's why everybody's upset, on the defensive. You feel you haven't been heard. So something is not working with the process.
I think
this was an attempt to shift that
together. My point is that there is no working group. Britt called it a task force. I called it a stakeholders advisory board or a working group. We need something. We need to find a way to work together where people feel like their trusted representatives are putting their best foot forward for this piece of property, but also for homelessness in Davis and Yolo County. It seems to me that there aren't really any new ideas coming to the table, that we see a pot of money and we just try to go for it and boom, done. And hopefully those people who live nearby won't mind. And that's political expediency, but that's not going to win any awards, and that's not going to make anybody happy.
Well, Matthew, and that's part of why we're here. And so we want to, I hear that, and if this process in and of itself is not going to get the needs met, then we need to shift a little bit. So I am sorry not keeping track of the order, but I see Eric and Tracy, Jacqueline, and Tim. So maybe we go there.
Thanks. I lowered my hand. Exactly what Matthew said. Elvia, you asked us what, our opinion of what collaboration looks like, and it's exactly what Matt said. It is working together for what good looks like. It's talking about solutions to coming up with that good versus what you've proposed here, which is to listen to the problems that we have with the project. We have given our problems with the site, with projects. We've spoken ad nauseum in front of council for many meetings. There's a lot of problems that have been conveyed, and honestly, I'm sick of our approach, and I'll take ownership as being part of it. We've been a problem-oriented approach as a neighborhood against the council, where we stand in front of them and lay out the problems. Collaboration to me is sitting around talking about what looks good, what's going to work, what we can be proud of. Exactly what Matt said, much better than I did.
So shifting away from a problem-oriented approach and focusing on just what's wrong, what's not working, to what will work, what can we envision working? An award-winning facility, whatever those needs are that you have, what will it take to develop that together in collaboration?
Yeah, and not an us versus them. It's a we. And again, I want to harp on the conflict thing, but conflict is two or more parties. Get rid of that. Like, let's just sit down and collaborate together as one around a table.
Yes.
Well, there's a big piece of understanding the needs, understanding your needs as individuals, as community members, as public officials, so that you're all aware of that, and then can work towards solutions that will meet most of the needs, ideally, right? So conflicts come up when we don't have our needs met, and we get stuck in our positions, and we just can't let go for whatever reason. We're not able to do it. We're not able to hear new information. It's really hard, especially when we feel very strongly and we've lived certain experiences. The only way you can get through that is to get through that through some dialogue, and to understand those needs so that then you can come up with solutions. So let's see, I think it was Eric, and then Tracy, and then Jacqueline, and then Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have a question. Well, first, I just want to clarify for the record that you did say YOLO conflict resolution. And then moving on, I have a question for Councilmember Josh Chapman, if he is available to answer.
We're not taking questions right now, but you can raise the question and we'll note it.
Okay, my question is, where is the Pacifico inspection report from the All Points Inspection Center, or whatever they call themselves? It's All Points. From what I understand, the inspection was completed in April of 2021, and here we are December 1st, and we have still not received that inspection report. And then I'd also like to make the comment for the record, in November 7th, 1988, the Oak Shade conditions of approval. That's when this development was taking place. So November 7th, 1988, the environmental documents, the EIR 2-86, the South Davis specific plan, and the negative.
So I'm sorry, Tracy, I'm going to interrupt you, because what we're doing right now is deciding, co-creating an agenda. We're not getting into specific topics or questions that we have. We pivoted to developing or co-creating an agenda. So we can focus on that.
Okay, let's put this on the agenda. Okay.
What is
on
the
November
agenda
7th,
item?
1988, the environmental documents need to be reviewed because the EIR 2-86 of the South Davis specific plan negative declaration 1-88 states that it adequately addresses anticipated impacts and no new mitigation measures are required. So the problem here that needs to be addressed is this. On that map associated with that EIR, there is no evergreen court on that map. So I just want to really focus on this because it takes us to the beginning of when this development took place, which may be a good place to start.
So
because
Tracy, you want to have.
I want to have a new EIR.
You want
That's
to
what I
have the
want.
data that is the decisions are being based on clearly spelled out. And if that
What I'm
requires a new
saying-
EIR, that's another topic, right? But
What
you
I'm
wanna-
saying is that according to CEQA, we need a new EIR, okay? Because the Evergreen wasn't a part of the anything. So that's where it all begins, and that's where the problems begin.
So that has to do with the basic data that people are looking at in making decisions on this property.
Yeah, and I also
get
would
it.
like to say that there's a lot of assumptions and a lot of talk about feelings. So and I think we've agreed that we don't want to do that. We're going to be discussing facts, correct?
I cannot separate them. I know some people think they can, but it's very difficult. I think our emotions are intertwined with the data, and we can try to separate them and section them out. But what's driving us and motivating us is that our values and our emotions, and we can't ignore them. So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Jacqueline.
This is Peter cutting in. I realize I'm interrupting. However,
Peter?
I'm signing off. I tried to stay on. I'm disappointed. And I hope this happens again in better form and detail.
Thank you, Peter. We appreciate you being here. And we do have Peter's contact information so that we can reach out. So just to make it clear again that what we have abandoned our agenda at the group's request, we have pivoted to co-creating an agenda that will meet most needs. And our public officials are listening, they're not weighing in because they really want to hear your input. So let's proceed with Jacqueline.
I'd like to allow Tim to go first and then go after. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tim, would you go ahead?
Sure, thank you. I think for me, in terms of being able to start the process of thinking about co-creating the award-winning facility that Matt described, I think that's an excellent analysis, an excellent point to make. For me, the information I would need to know to start that process is what the inspections are that Tracy mentioned, what sort of work actually will need to be done to renovate these properties so that we get adequate facility, and not just adequate, but one that is good for the community. So we need to know the scope of the work. Then we need to know what the budget is going to be to do that. The budget not only for renovating the specific Calworks project, but the entire budget for the property so that it's treated as a singular unit. And we don't have Calworks managed with the left hand and the right hand manages the remainder of the property. It really needs to be a singular unit if it is going to work and be managed and oversight by one competent agency. And so for me, those 2 points, I think, would help facilitate that thinking in terms of co-creating. What are the problems? True analysis. And then what is the real budget that we will have available to make this that award-winning facility? And so at some future meeting, I think that would be helpful information.
Right. So you want to define what is that award-winning facility look like? Then you had some requests for data. What are the inspections that Tracy referred to? What work will be done, specifically the scope of work, the budget, what budget is available. You'd like to see the entire property treated as one rather than two singular units, and to have that.
Correct. And the budget, what budget would be available for the entire property to be brought up to speed, essentially.
Right. And probably going along with that might be a timeline. Sometimes budgets are tied to funds available by fiscal year or something. So let me thank you, Tim. Let me go to Ellen and then to Olga.
Hello again. It's 8 o'clock. I would really like to hear the city presentation before it hits 9. That's all I have to say.
So we will do that in no more than 10 minutes. So any other questions, we'll give it 10 more minutes maximum, and then we'll do that, and then we'll come back. Thank you, Ellen. Olga, I know we couldn't hear you earlier. Can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear? So they're doing these small.
Olga, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. What was your question or your comment?
I live at Pacifico. Can
Okay.
we do something about making it continue and continue well?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Did you hear me?
No, can you repeat that, Olga?
Yes, I live at Pacifico. I would like to know what we can do to make it go forward and be healthy.
Okay.
Now, why are we here? Are we talking about the current Pacifico residents or new Pacifico plans?
I think we're here talking about both. There are some concerns about the entire property, and then there is a proposal for a use of the 2 empty buildings that are not currently being occupied.
They
So we're
should
kind of
be occupied by low-income people. That's what this place is.
right, right.
No kids.
So you want to make sure that they're occupied by low-income folks.
Low-income folks, no children unless you have 24/7 people living in every building
Okay.
to monitor them.
So you'd
rather
like
than
to see
parents.
it be an adult-only community.
No, a lot less monitoring required. It's bad enough as it is. If you have kids, you have to monitor the parents.
Okay. Anything else, Olga?
Yes, please, let's talk about Pacifico and we can talk about anything else later. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga.
Thank you for hearing.
Okay, I see Matthew. Oh, no, well, wait, let me go back to Jacqueline, because I was going to go back to you after Tim. Thank you, Jacqueline. And then we'll come back to Matthew.
Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to also support having the presentation tonight, and hopefully if there will be time afterwards to add to the questions along the lines of Tim's questions. I think many of us will start having some of those ideas of what we would like to hear. And then a request, I think, that will help people feel heard. And I think that you're really making a huge effort to make sure people feel heard. But using Tracy's request as an example, I know that Tracy will probably feel more heard if what is written down is not data, but the actual EIR, whatever the numbers were that she wrote that she wanted to have on the agenda. It may come out that we're talking about data later, but I think that when a specific request is made from the community, that if it can be verbatim written down, it will only imbue trust. And the result may be the same, but I think that building trust in that way will be beneficial. And I look forward to the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So data is the category, and then under that, there will probably be very specific things, the data that you all need to have in order to move the conversation along. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Great. Matthew.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done around data. So, and I mean, these are things that I think about all the time. So I'm just going to rattle off a few. Number one is how do we characterize the current situation? What is the current total homeless burden that Davis feels like it needs to deal with? What are the various stages of housing that people go through as they move through low-income housing? They go through a homeless shelter, then do they end up in a place like Pacifico, then do they go to someplace else? What does that transition look like? Understanding what those flows are in terms of people, what the flows are in terms of resources. Those are very important. And then from an outcomes perspective, we need to understand what are the metrics of success? What are the actual data metrics that we need to collect to say that this is a successful project? And we can all agree about that this is a success. Now, the city may have different metrics that are important to them, and the neighbors may have different metrics that are important to them, and the Pacifico residents may have different metrics that are important to them. But as far as I can see, the city nor the county have bothered to do any of this kind of background research, or if they have, they haven't disclosed it to us, which brings me to my last point that Jacqueline said about trust. If we want to have trust, we need transparency. We need transparency about the data and what the city knows, right? We need to work with each other like partners that trust each other. And when you trust each other, you share. And we haven't been getting the shared information. What we get a lot of is, let me get back to you on that. And I essentially, which amounts to, I hope you forget you asked me that because I'm not going to get back to you on that.
Yeah, you haven't had a good experience with that. And it sounds like you have a need for more very specific information to know how success is measured, maybe even to co-create that, to understand and be on the same page about it.
Absolutely co-create the measures of success, because each of the different stakeholder groups have different ideas. You know, Olga, I'm so glad Olga spoke up. And you know, my grandmother's name is Olga, and she was so sweet to me. So for me, hearing Olga speak up, it was wonderful. And I just want to say that I appreciate all of these different groups. You know, my father was homeless in Davis for many years, and so I come at this with not just as a neighbor of Pacifico, but as someone who has a genuine interest in solving these problems. So I think that I recognize that each of these different stakeholder groups have different metrics of success, and we need to put them all on the board and collaborate. That's the definition of collaboration, that we can all get our needs met.
Right, exactly. And recognizing that there are points where not all needs will be met, and making some, you know, some compromises. And also that we're not talking about the homeless problem in Davis. That is a huge topic. Well, we're talking about Pacifico and what role does it play in the bigger, so it helps to understand the flow. It helps to understand what happens, but we're not going to solve the homeless problem here.
I'm not suggesting we solve the homeless
problem. But understand the trends and understand how it's affected by the trends. Absolutely.
No, Matt wasn't suggesting that. We know that. Thank you though for reiterating.
Right, no, absolutely. Okay, so I see Britt's hand up, and I think Britt, you might be the last question, so go ahead.
Okay, to everybody's relief, I'm sure. So yeah, so in terms of issues that I think we want to put on the table or information we want to get, one of the things I think it's really important to understand is, what are the other options for if the decision ultimately is made, which some of us think ought to be the case, but others may not, that really that is not an appropriate site, for example, for a homeless shelter. What are the other options for putting those facilities elsewhere? What has the city looked at? What are the costs? And what could be there in place of an actual homeless shelter? And what are the options for example, downsizing the number of beds to, if it was affordable housing but not homeless shelter, you know, traditional, actual long-term affordable housing, what would be the appropriate size of that space? Maybe it's only, you know, 20 units, but what would that be? How would the other issues around meeting the city's affordable housing element needs be met? What are the options, other options for meeting with that? We hear the city staff say, well, it has to be that. We know that's not true. We know they have other options for meeting that. What would those be? What would the cost be? So it's sort of this whole broader issue of what is the appropriate use of that site in the context of the overall city effort to address homelessness and affordable housing and all those other things.
Right. So again, understanding what else is happening, what other options are available that might help put into focus what's the best use of this property, where's the need, right? And again, we need to define the scope carefully, because we're not taking on the whole, you know, the whole affordable housing plan project, but we need to know the layout just enough to understand what makes sense here. And it really comes to, you understanding and having whatever facts you need. And then the city understanding what are your concerns. I mean, that's why that was the big part of this process, was what are the concerns about it? Because then they can get to specifics of addressing those. Until those are really fully understood, we're kind of shooting in the dark, hoping that that works, So we're going to move on to the presentation, which will take no more than about 10 minutes. And then we'll have a few minutes for wrap up and next steps. So we can talk about what happens next. So I'm going to ask Diane Paro, if you would, to please go ahead and give us the information that you were going to provide as part of our meeting today.
And hi, everyone, I'm Diane. And Elvia, I'm in the spirit of the way I think the conversation's going. I think I need to be super clear that what has been prepared tonight is about 15 bullet points, and you have all heard them before. It is very basic data about Pacifico and some of the specifics of the Calworks proposal. So I am perfectly happy to read those, but when you asked for data and information that you requested, I really don't want to just spew this out and create more problem that I didn't say what it is you're expecting. So I just want to check in with you, Elvia, that you still want me to go ahead and take time to present these kind of basic facts about the facility. Yes.
I think the intent, acknowledging that the intent here was to make sure everybody was on the same page going into our small group discussions, that it was not a full, course on the whole history of Pacifico and every little thing that's happened, that it focuses on the highlights and making sure that people have some understanding of what we're talking about as we go into our small group discussions.
Alrighty then. Okay. Topic number one, what is Pacifico? Pacifico is an all affordable rental property owned by the city of Davis, and it's located at the end of Drew Circle, which is adjacent to the Poudre Creek bike path. There are 4 almost identical 3-story buildings, each with roughly 24 bedrooms. The buildings are set up in a communal living style with common kitchen, living, and bathroom areas. 2 of the buildings are closed and not inhabited currently. 2 of the buildings are occupied, and they have approximately 28 residents in total. The city is working to determine what needs to be done to rehab and reopen the 2 closed buildings. This property has an affordable housing requirement called a covenant recorded on it. It is included in the city's existing allocations for affordable housing. The city council concurred with information from the city attorney in January of this year that the property needs to continue to provide affordable beds. All right, those are the notes on what is Pacifico. The second topic is what is proposed for Calworks. This past spring, Yolo County submitted a proposal to the city to locate a Calworks program in 1 or 2 of the buildings on this property. Calworks, as you may know, is a government assistance program for families existing in homelessness. Participants must have at least 1 child under the age of 18 to be eligible for this program. The program provides accommodations for these families, as well as access to services to try to assist the families getting back on their feet and into permanent housing. Or permanent supportive housing if that is needed. The program provides cash aid, food stamps, medical insurance, employment support, and services to eligible families. Yolo County operates this program. The Calworks Housing Support Program, that you'll see written as HSP, provides state funding to assist Calworks families in quickly obtaining permanent housing and provides wraparound support services to families to assist in their housing retention. The proposal for Pacifico is to utilize the 2 vacant buildings, potentially with a 5-year master lease. The county has other Calworks projects similar operating in Woodland and West Sacramento, and there are a few units in Davis. A future project in Woodland is in the planning stages, and there are 41 families in units right now across Yolo County. The current ratio of staff to families at Calworks service sites is 1 staff member to 12 people. Case managers are on site during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The plan for Pacifico would be to contract with a local community-based organization for additional after-hours case management. The plan is to have security on site either 24/7 or when there is no case manager on site. If the Calworks proposal is accepted, what will happen to the rest of the property? If the Calworks proposal is accepted, 1/2 of the property would be part of Calworks and the other 2 buildings would remain as they are, long-term rental housing for low-income individuals. There would be property modifications necessary to accommodate the Calworks program, including separating the outdoor space, altering the community bathrooms to something appropriate for families, and the county does not believe that there would be major changes necessary to the exterior of the buildings. The city proposes to use the income generated from the Calworks lease to assist with improvements and services for the non-Calworks or the other 2 buildings on the property. These things could include the city's portion of security services, supporting housing services to Pacifico residents, property management, or maintenance costs. So, basic facts, that would have been an intro, and I'm sorry, it's not, we're past the intro time, but there you have it.
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
So again, that's basic facts about the both Pacifico and the Calworks project that's being proposed. I see a couple of hands, Eric and then Jacqueline.
Thanks. I'm just wondering if we could get a copy of what was just read. I mean, I appreciate taking time and giving it to us. I don't think it makes sense to critique a presentation here. It's not going to do anybody any good. But if you could circulate that to all the members who RSVP'd, along with the agenda that was asked for, that would be great. And we can read it. It's just hard to decipher verbally without actual visuals or bullets.
Okay.
When we hopefully collaborate on future meetings, we can talk about presentations that we can come up with together.
Okay, Eric, so you're requesting a copy of the agenda and the written comments that were just delivered, the presentation.
Yeah, just circulated both to the whole, all the attendees.
Okay. Jacqueline?
Yeah, that was actually my same request, but I was going to make it, if it's possible, to send it immediately, just like the agenda was sent, because that might help us facilitate our questions. The information, we went through it quickly. There were things that triggered an idea, but then the next item came along, and it's really hard to organize thoughts and receive all of it at the same time. So if it's possible, the same way the agenda was sent out at the beginning of the meeting, to have that document sent to us immediately, that might help us facilitate some of those questions that we were looking to have identified for what we need to answer.
Okay, so it would help to have it in front of you, looking at it, to then be able to formulate questions about it.
I'm actually requesting, could it be sent to us right now, the same way it was the other email, since we had that done at the beginning of today's meeting.
If one of our city staff members could do that, you have the list. I don't have access to it right now, but that would be great. And then you all have it. You don't have to do it tomorrow or later.
We'll try to get that done, Elvia. We'll see.
Thank you, Diane.
I have one piece, somebody else has the other, but.
Okay, thank you. And again, we are, remember, co-creating an agenda. So we're likely not going to get into questions about what was just said, but that could be an agenda item. And you could have other requests for information, right? So
I think it would help us identify what we wanted to include in the agenda.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Olga, I see your hand up. Do you have a question or comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Why do you want to change Pacifico? We have a lot of homeless single people. Open up the 4 buildings as they were meant to be opened for single people without spending money on construction, separating the property. That's all bullshit.
Hmm. So your main question is why change it? Keep it
Why
for
are
the
you spending
original
money when
purpose.
there are lots of homeless people here? Some of the rooms in the buildings where I live aren't even occupied. You're
Hmm.
saying that there are no more single people who are not homeless, they've disappeared? I see them at the library every day.
Okay. So
Find
you'd like,
another home for the families. Buildings A and B in Pacifico are not now built for families. They are built for single adults.
right, so just to,
Occupy them, fill them up.
okay,
You
so
don't
you're
have to
saying,
put in, you don't have to separate the property. You don't have to do anything. Just fill them up with people.
okay, so you would like to have them all occupied the way they were
I
originally
don't like
intended.
anything. I know that homelessness is here. Let's deal with the homeless people and find something appropriate for the families. I'm glad for Calworks. I'm sure there are other places they can rebuild, reconstruct, refence.
Okay.
You're
Anything
not
else?
dealing with the problem. We have many homeless single people. Give them a home. It's here, empty, 2 empty buildings and some empty rooms in buildings C and D where I live.
Anything else, Olga?
Well, good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your input. Let me see. I'm going to go to Tracy and then Matthew.
Hi, thank you. I'm just so glad, Olga, that you have joined. It's really important and that they hear from you. And I wish more from Pacifico would join. But the reason that they can't put people in the buildings is because they're not habitable. And I do want to point out also that since like 2017, looking at May 1st to July or June 30th, there haven't been more than an average of 34 people living at that facility. And that needs to be taken into consideration, considering the EIR and the CEQA analysis are not reflective of the reality. And so I want to ensure that those as well as the inspection reports are, I don't want to hear your interpretation or talk about it. I want to actually receive those inspection reports. Thank you.
And is that the inspection report you mentioned before, Tracy? Or
Yes.
can you, the ones that you enumerated before?
Yes.
By number, okay.
Yeah. We want to receive them. I don't want to talk about them. I want to receive them. In fact, I want to receive them about several months ago.
Okay, thank you. Matthew?
I am thrilled we are having such a vibrant discussion. And I was so happy to hear Olga speak up again. It's fantastic. And I think that the folks from the city here should heed her words and listen to what she's saying. I understand that the buildings are not able to house people. Tracy made a great point. They're just not habitable, unfortunately. I think what I would like to hear, maybe someone from the city or Council Member Provenza, now that they've had a listening session to us in the way that we wanted to speak, maybe we can hear from the city members and council members about this feedback that they're getting. And I would like to propose before that happens that I know that Jacqueline has forwarded a list of very smart questions about Pacifico. And Tracy has asked for some very smart information about Pacifico. And we have not received any information as a stakeholder group about those things. And to think that we're going to start a new project without having any data, going off half-cocked, assuming that it's going to work, without, thinking about how sometimes the best intentions lead to the worst consequences, and without gaming out the situation, I think is bad. So I would propose that we shelve the idea of the proposal being put forward for the Calworks until such time that we actually have data where we can answer questions definitively about all of these things. Because if we don't have the data to answer these questions, we shouldn't be playing games with people's lives, putting them into these buildings like this.
Okay, so Matthew, you'd like to see some more data. You'd like to hear from public officials, some feedback on what they've heard so far. So there's been a lot said.
But there's one more crucial piece.
Mhm.
I'd like to hear them say that they're not ready to do any of this until they have the data that shows that this is actually the best thing to do. And that includes all of this data.
I understand your expectation, what you would like to see. And then we need to let them decide what they're willing to share or not. So my sense is that, again, we're co-creating this agenda. So making sure that if this is an item you want on there, that we allow some time in your agenda for the public officials to provide that information so that they have a chance to digest and think about what was said tonight and gather and provide information that you've requested. So that would be an agenda item on that collaborative agenda that we're formulating tonight.
Can I just be clear though? It's not just an agenda for one meeting, right? We're talking about, yeah, it's a process. So it's like making an agenda for one meeting together. That's part of the collaborative process, and it should have been happening already. And I am truly sorry that it isn't, because we've been asking for that for a while. But wherever we're here
and with
now,
only a subset of this group.
Right, potentially, right, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So, right. And you've been dealing with this issue for a while. It's not your first meeting. I understand that. So there's, you've heard some of this before. You've expressed this before. I understand that. We're trying to shift that dynamic so that we can move forward. And I hear frustration and I hear impatience. And if we're talking about a process, we are talking about something that's going to take a little more time and energy on everyone's part, and some commitment to both provide information and to listen to new information.
And that is why I'm proposing that they table this proposal with the Calworks until such time that we can all come together and work collaboratively together to find a solution that meets everybody's needs.
And we're hearing your proposal, Matthew. We're just not in a place to make any decisions tonight. That's not part of this process right now. Let me go to Jacqueline.
Thank you. One of the things that I wanted to add as an agenda item, well, you'll help figure out the best way to articulate it, but as we're identifying data that we would like to have tonight during the meeting, I know that there will be additional things that we will either think up after the fact or that we would like to clarify. And so a short example, I think I may have heard that you understood when Tracy was talking about the numbers, when she listed a long series of numbers, that you understood that to be the inspection reports, where actually those were two separate things that Tracy was requesting.
Right.
And she would be the best person to articulate what those two things were. But the natural fact is that there's so much data being spoken of that it would be beneficial that after the notes are collected here from tonight's meeting, that the community would have the opportunity to review them and add to them. And that one of the agenda items would be then that the city and the county would provide responses in written form, preferably a week in advance of any meeting, so that we have time to read and review, understand, and come prepared to have a conversation. One of the feelings that I personally have had, and I've heard echoed, is the feeling that we arrive to a meeting without having an understanding of what we're walking into. We don't have the data in advance to be able to articulate and think about what could we envision that might be a positive solution. And so going forward, to be able to have the data in advance, but also that the agenda would have the opportunity for us to write in what our questions are. Some of the things have been sent, but consolidation is probably useful. So that was one agenda item. Another agenda item would be to pull in the data from past commissions. I know that the Social Services Commission has had meetings that have been about Pacifico where neighbors have spoken, and potentially other important meetings, so that information is relevant information is pulled in. And maybe it would be the neighbors and Pacifico members who might be able to articulate what is that relevant. And the city may have some as well, but I don't know that the perceptions would be identical, just because everybody has their own perceptions.
Sure.
But so that information could be brought in. So that was the two things I wanted to say. I did want to support Matt's statement. And actually it would be both Matt and Olga who spoke up, that the Calworks proposal feels very rushed, unplanned, prepared for. I think I've heard from many neighbors that there's a strong concern about having children at that facility. So that was said many times at the Social Services Commission. And it was brought up, and I don't want that information to be lost. I'm hearing Olga say it again. So in two separate venues, I'm hearing a concern, and a lot of it is about that there would be insufficient supervision and other unintended consequences. So bringing that information in, so that was point 2. And then point 3, not advancing with the Calworks proposal because the timing is not there to be able to actually do a collaborative process. It's an either or based on the timing that I have heard. And so to do a collaborative process would require more time than it would to be able to meet the Calworks proposal timing.
Sorry.
Oh, I can't hear you. What was
Sorry. That's certainly a consideration, and ultimately the council's decision as to whether they need to move forward, you know, based on all the other information they have or not. Let's see, I'm going to hear from Tracy, then we're going to begin to wrap things up here.
Thank you. I just want to second what Jacqueline said and what Matt said and what Olga said. Thank you.
Okay. So I also heard Tracy, just to go back to what Jacqueline was saying, you know, the data, sorting out relevant data, gathering data. I think relevant is the term. As I said, the scope of the issue has to be relevant enough to what we're talking about, right? And some information is already available. They're public documents, and some information would need to be gathered. So sorting through what is the relevant data, again, would take some time. And depending on what the relevant, you know, scope is. So do I see 4 hands up, or was that from before? Okay, I do see 4 hands up. And again, we are focused today on, as we pivoted from the original agenda to developing an agenda for a future meeting that would include these things, or a future series of meetings to include these things. I think we probably have enough for a few meetings, but depending on what the outcome is and what the next steps are, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So let's be brief so we can capture everybody's comments here before we start winding down, but also focus on what are the elements of a collaborative agenda that you want to make sure are included. Britt, and then Supervisor Provenza, welcome. And we'll go to Matthew.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we're making some progress. One of the things I wanted to echo was this idea that you know, it's premature to decide on any particular new proposal for that site. I mean, I think what we've seen recently in the last few years with regard to Pacifico is it's sort of it's sort of a ready, fire, aim approach there. It's available. So we first became really aware of what was going on there a few years ago when there was a proposal from the county to go and put in a bunch of homeless related stuff and a bunch of stuff that even some of which people felt was not, the council decided was not right, but it was because it was there, it was available. And then recently we just learned that the Human Services Commission, which seemed like a bunch of well-meaning but not very well-informed people, basically someone came to them and said, hey, let's put the winter shelter at they said, sure, it's available, let's put it there. And now we've got this, and it's like, oh, it's available, let's put it there. And what I think, to just reemphasize what I said before, I think we need to sort of step back and approach this like there's nothing there now. What is the appropriate and most appropriate use for that site? Obviously, it has to be affordable housing, but it doesn't have to be homeless shelter. It doesn't have to be 100 units. What is the most appropriate use of that site? How does that fit into everything else? You know, what sorts of things where shelters ought to be versus where, you know, transitional housing ought to be versus where permanent low-income housing ought to be? How does that fit in with the bike trail that goes by there? Let's look, you know, what are the options? Let's look at those sorts of issues and take a sort of broader principled approach to that before we get into specific proposals, whether it's renovating the buildings for more single-family homeless use or whether it's for the Calworks proposal. Again, we're sort of doing it backwards just because it's there.
Right. Again, that's what you had stated earlier, kind of take a broader approach and a step back and look at the best use of that property. Yeah.
Right.
Supervisor Prevents, I know that you came in a little later and we were had an agenda that we then diverted from, and we're now in the process of creating agenda items for a future meeting, it looks like. We don't know when that will happen yet. So did you have a comment or a question that you wanted to include as part of that?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the process a little bit and say that, you know, this was a tough meeting, but on the other hand, it's one that is a great cause for optimism in me, because I don't hear people saying no. I hear people saying they want to work collaboratively. And you know, in particular, award-winning facility. I love that because that's kind of my vision of what I would like to see. And the way this process on the Pacifico, on the county's proposal, it's the county staff is trying to find a place to locate housing for this group of people. And it's, of course, families with children, largely moms with children. And, you know, and a lot of them are people that lived in houses just like you, but they were victims of domestic violence or had some tragedy in their life and found themselves homeless. And I've referred people myself to this program, and it's saved lives. We're one of the only counties in the state that has zero homelessness among families with children. We through Calworks place every one of them. Unfortunately, some of them are in hotels, motels, in situations that aren't the best situation to be in. And the county is trying to create a better situation for these families. But it's also an opportunity to create a better situation for the surrounding neighborhood and for Pacifico, because with this proposal comes a lot of money. Calworks is putting up money, unlike what the state usually does to give us programs and then not the money. They're giving a lot of money. So it's a funding stream that doesn't exist now that can be used not just to make the changes and renovations in the two buildings the county would take over, but the city then could use money to rehabilitate the rest of the facility, and, you know, perhaps even address some of the problems in the surrounding area, because I would like to see those issues addressed. Now, where am I on this? I'm undecided because I don't know what the final proposal is going to look like. There's a tentative contract being negotiated between city and county staff. That's going to go to the city, and the city council will either approve or not approve it. And it's also going to go to the County Board of Supervisors. And as this is my district, and it's the tradition of our board to give great deference to the opinion of the county supervisor who represents the district. And I want to see a transformative project. I don't want to see a project that's going to make the neighborhood worse. And I also don't want to see a project that's going to maintain the status quo. So that's my goal, and I think it's the city's goal. Now, you are right to ask to see a budget. How much of that money is going to be spent? Absolutely right to ask to see what it's going to cost and to see a budget. Any of the documents you mentioned, those are public documents, which you have a right to request in the Public Records Act. And there's no reason you can't see, for example, if there is a inspection report that's been completed, those are public documents and you should be able to see them. And I'm happy to share anything that I have with everybody here at any time, because I think that I agree with you on transparency. And in terms of collaborative process, that is the way to go. And I think a collaborative process that if this project goes forward, that goes beyond the creation of Pacifico, but that goes a continuing collaboration that would be your neighborhood group and perhaps the Pacifico group. I'm not sure what that group would look like, but people that would be engaged in an ongoing basis in addressing the problems. And the reason I'm optimistic is that I hear, and I know you're not all of the same mind, you don't necessarily agree on everything, but that you do have a desire to improve the neighborhood, and you do have a desire to address homelessness. This isn't the only project. The city is working on other projects for homelessness, and you can't, by the way, you cannot keep kids out of a low-income housing project. It's unlawful discrimination under Supreme Court rulings in California. So there are likely to be children in both, but the new Pacifico problem will have supervision.
Thank you, Supervisor Provenza. I don't want to interrupt you, but I also don't want to get into the specifics of the project.
And I'm just trying to—
I think that's a valid agenda item, if you will, to provide more information.
That so people know. And when I say I'm undecided is I'm going to be working with the city, but at the end of the day, this project has to pencil out or I don't support it. So it's not like anybody's trying to railroad people here. And I'd be happy to meet with your association anytime, as with Josh and Mayor Partita, I know, and I kind of thought that's what this meeting was today.
For all public officials to address the group as part of a future meeting or differently. So I appreciate your comments and you sharing the information. And of course, you're available as a public official to anyone to contact you and answer any questions that they might have for you. I'm sure everyone knows where to reach you, right?
Well, I'm not sure they do, but Tracy does, and she can give that information.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to pivot real soon here because we need to make some decisions. So unless you have a new item to add to a potential future agenda, I'm going to ask you to hold your question or your comment, because we have quite a bit of information that we've gathered about what you would like to see happen. And part of what we need to decide on is, one, is there willingness to continue this process, which would mean maybe from our standpoint, from the standpoint of YCRC and the service that we can provide the community, is to help develop that process, which often for us means we might be meeting separately with the neighborhood group and talk through, here are the agenda items that you brought up. What does the process look like? Specifics about what data information, then meeting separately with the city officials, going through a similar process, then coming together and creating that collaborative agenda so that everybody comes to the table knowing exactly what to expect, including what ground rules you need to have a productive conversation. So that's in a nutshell what something might look like. So we need to gauge willingness, and if we're not ready to decide, then what we can, Kara, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're my ED, you can veto anything I say here, that we can commit to following up with each group and kind of processing what we've done so far, coming up with all the agenda items you've all had addressed, and talking about what does a collaborative process look like going forward. Does that make sense? And Kara, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think if there's the willingness to do that, then absolutely. If folks are, interested in having those kinds of discussions separately before we were to meet again jointly, absolutely. I think that could be a part of a process.
So
I have something I'd like to add
yeah.
potentially to the agenda.
Who am I
And that was-
speaking? Who am I hearing? Is this
This
Tim?
is Tim. I have
I
my
don't
hand
see you.
up.
Okay.
I have Supervisor Provenza was starting to get into some specifics, and you told him specifically that you did not want him to get into the specifics at this point. I'm curious why that is, but maybe more so than I would like to hear what he has to say on a future agenda item. I think what Supervisor Provenza was saying was exceptionally valuable to hear. So I'd like to hear those specifics, and I think
That's
it would be important to do so.
Yeah, that's exactly why I said that this would be a perfect item for an agenda, so that we have time to hear what he has to say, and you have time to ask questions if that needs to happen. This is not an opportunity for public officials to have a say necessarily, but of course everyone is welcome to weigh in. So that's why I cut you off, Supervisor Provenza, because we didn't have time today to get into the specifics. That was not planned, but we want to make sure that it's captured so that it's part of the agenda and is given the appropriate time that it needs to happen.
So just to speak up for a future agenda item would be to have any timeframes that actually all timeframes for all commissions, council, at the county level, at the city level, have those really just pulled out either in a Word document timeline or if there's a visual timeline to really help people understand where the time frame is that allows people to participate, to be able to prepare themselves and to make a commitment. And if there are time frames that are known now, and I actually want to articulate, I want to say the same that Tim said. I really appreciated hearing Jim Provenza speak. I found that very important. And I actually feel like that was in response to our request today to receive information, because that is the expectation we came to this meeting with. So if he has anything in addition to say about timeframes or things that would help us know how we will be able to collaboratively move forward, that would be beneficial at this moment rather than waiting to an undefined future date.
So if there is a timeline with a proposed project decision, it might be with someone from the city to address that. If there is a deadline or a constraint in terms of funding or things like that, that we need to be aware of, that could be something that one of the council members might share so that we're aware of it.
I think Nolan might be able to address that. There is a time frame to receive the funding from Calworks. I don't know what that is. And it's been moved once, but I think he could address that.
Do you want me to speak now, or is that appropriate?
Well, no, let me, we have about 10 minutes. So I want to make sure that that becomes part of it. But if there is a time frame, for example, if the project is going before the city council for a decision next week, we need to know that, because another meeting is not going to make any sense, right?
I think we need to know the next 2 to 3 months out. So I think while we're all here together.
Is there a quick answer that maybe Councilmember Chapman or Mayor Partida might say, here's our time frame, just in a couple of sentences?
Sure, thank you. It's my understanding that this currently is not on the long range calendar. There's nothing on the calendar stating that when this is coming back up again. It is my intention to engage in this meeting, hear what's going on this evening, and then set next steps moving forward and what that looks like, and connect with this group before anything else moves forward. And that's definitely my intention. There is nothing that has come forward to me that has a timeline related to funding or a decision having to be made in the next month or funding goes away, to my understanding, unless Mayor Partida or Kelly Stakowicz has more information on that. That is my current understanding of this situation.
Thank you.
I will say that is my understanding as well. And I'll add that before the city makes a decision, the county has to make a decision is part of how I understand it as well. So it's a multi-step process, but we wanted to be sure that we made these connections before any of the process went forward. I'd also like to take this opportunity to be sure that there are other folks on this call that haven't spoken up, haven't added anything to the agenda or added any thoughts that they have. So before we go off, I just want to be absolutely sure that there's not anybody else that wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Partida. I know we haven't heard from Patty or Robert or Mark, I believe, well, yeah, Moira or Ron. So please, if any of you want to speak.
My name is Robert.
Hi, Robert.
In response to your question, the points that I would have favored making have already been made, particularly by Matthew and Jacqueline, and I thank them for having expressed themselves far better than I could have any of these points.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for speaking up. Moria or Ron, do you wish to add anything else or have a question or suggestion?
Hi, this is Ron. I'm mostly here to listen at this point. I'm glad we're going to have a collaborative agenda formed in the future. I see Barbara Friedman has her hand up, and I don't know if she got a chance to speak. But I would say for data, I joined at 7:30, so I don't know if this was already mentioned, but I would like to know the Calworks success record in their other sites, how they've handled it, what the general issues have been there, and how successful they've been to address them.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So some more information, specific data from the Calworks folks might be helpful. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
thanks.
Thank you, Ron. Moira, did you have anything to add or any question or comment?
Barbara hasn't spoken yet, and she has her hand up.
Yes, I just want to make sure we haven't heard from folks we haven't heard from at all. Okay. Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
Thank you. I just had, just to add on to the Calworks data that I'd like to hear about, and that is exactly where those facilities are in the county and how large they are compared to what's being proposed here, how many people they usually house, and if there have been difficulties, what those have been, and who is the case managers for those, and more information about what the case manager's role will be and who that person or people would be, what the turnover is like in case management for that kind of position. If it's one person Monday through Friday, or if it's people coming in daily, and again, you know, what the turnover for that job is in general. And then just another comment, I appreciate hearing from Olga about children and not wanting children. I also understand that that legally is not an option, but if we're talking about putting only families, then obviously that's a lot more children. So I would love to hear at some point if someone wanted to share what the concern is about having children in a facility in Pacifico in particular. That's all I had. Thank you all.
Okay. So the issue of having children there and what is the concern there? Okay. And again, some further detailed information about Calworks and maybe the typical day and the role of the case manager and who's coming in, how long are they staying, things like that. Okay. Okay. So it sounds to me like there is willingness to work on future gathering with a collaborative agenda that both or everybody would have some say in, and that there is no constraint, immediate constraint in terms of time, so that we have some time to make that happen. So as I said before, what we can commit to is to assisting you with that if you'd like us to continue. So that would involve us reaching out to you, and we would likely meet separately with a neighborhood group and go through a process with you and then with the city officials, and make sure that that agenda is a collaborative process, not just the process, but the product. And it may be that it's a series of meetings, as Matthew was talking about, because you've identified a lot of needs. There's information for data, request for information and data that may be a meeting in and of itself, where you hear from Nolan, where you hear from, and you have a chance to ask questions to gather the data that you need. But we don't know what that might look like yet. I'm not wanting to invent it on the spot. But if there is willingness to continue to work on that, I think that's wonderful. And that's kind of what we can offer, is our efforts to work with you on that.
Can I add a little bit more to the agenda?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. For me, we've started down this path as a neighborhood association, building a Google group where everybody can chime in, where we are in a very solution-oriented mindset as opposed to a problem-oriented mindset. And for me, I think what would be helpful is to start with what is the highest, I think Britt's asked, what's the highest and best use of Pacifico buildings? Let's start there. Before we consider any proposal, before we consider anything else, let's ask ourselves that. Let's ideate around that. And so for me, the next meeting that we have, it may be better facilitated by folks who have skills in things like design thinking, folks who have skills in out-of-the-box thinking, folks who have skills in actually harnessing a group's collective ideation energy, as opposed to trying to tamp down a potential conflict between the people who are in the room. I think there's enough sense here in this group that we want to work together towards a common solution. And I would like to maximize that as much as possible in the next meeting. And so that would mean a completely different kind of facilitation where we don't have the parental controls on the chat session or on the giving the thumbs up or anything like that, where people can actually speak in. Sometimes people talk over each other a little bit, but it's because we all are excited to actually be creating something that's awesome. Yeah. And that's where I think we want to get to.
Thank you, Matthew.
And the degree to which we can have facilitators who are trained in that kind of thinking, I think would really go a long ways.
Thank you, Matthew. And that would be the process of working with you to find out what it is you want to see happen. And it may be that we're not the best folks to do it, and that's okay. But that's a decision the group would need to make. So let me take one last comment from Tracy, and then we're going to close the meeting here so we can honor our time.
Thank you. I just would like to say quickly how inappropriate I think it is of the city to have brought on a whole nother project without fully addressing the current issues. And I do believe that it is important that the Calworks, they search for another site for the sake of those women and children, because I do not believe it is going to be happening at Pacifico. I don't know when the funds expire. Maybe they don't expire and for another year. But regardless, I do think that to really understand the issues, the reality of the situation, we need to have an appropriate environmental analysis done. And it should, because the Pacifico that was built there was based on an old EIR, and so the data is not relevant, and it needs to reflect the reality. And so please provide all those necessary documents that will inform us of the history of Pacifico and related to CEQA. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. And we heard you loud and clear. I think that's the comment you made when you first started. So
it is, but I
just
wanted to
reiterate
ensure that it's on
Thank
the
you.
agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to thank all of you for making the time to be with us tonight and for your flexibility with the process here. And really, I think you've laid some very strong foundation, hopefully for future conversations and collaboration. So thank you so much again. And you will likely be hearing from us to talk about next steps or to decide whether you want to continue working with us. So we're going to close the meeting now. And thank you again for being here.
Before you
to all the
close,
officials.
Elvia,
Yes.
can you please confirm?
Pardon me?
Can you confirm my question was the next 2 to 3 months, and Nolan was going to speak, and I only heard 1 month, and my calendar really needs more than a 1 month purview into what we are looking at. If Nolan could just let us know that there is nothing on the agenda all the way through the beginning of March, that we know we have that time for the conversation. And if not, then just having a date in mind is what we are asking for.
And you're looking for a date when it's calendared to come to council? Because I thought I heard.
No, not
Okay.
calendar to come to council. What I was asking is earlier is, are there any constraints? Are there anything in the calendar with respect to Calworks? And Nolan was offering to speak up, but he wasn't given the opportunity. And I think that visibility would help us plan how can we participate collaboratively. And 1 month is very short, especially if we have to plan a next meeting.
Yeah, so timeline constraints. Nolan, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so what I wanted to express earlier was that we run on a fiscal calendar year basis. So our funding cycle runs July 1st through June 30th. We have a sizable, a massive amount of money kind of earmarked and held to the side right now for the renovations and upgrades and rental payments and kind of getting the project going this fiscal year. So there's nothing agendized, there's no lease draft yet, there's nothing on the calendar. If this drags on those 6 months, 7 months, the project, we'll have to regroup. And honestly, those funds are kind of sitting there. We have families that are homeless in motels. So, I mean, there is some urgency in the sense that people need this housing option, and we have funding sitting aside, but there is nothing as far as an agenda item or a calendar item driving the budget discussion. So, I mean, from the county's vantage point, I mean, ideally, if we had some kind of semblance of a direction over the next 2 or 3 months, that would be ideal. But there's no specifics other than we'd like to have some general direction just so we can plan the budget and what to do with the funds, the remaining funds this fiscal year. Because the crazy part is if we don't spend them, we lose them. We give them back to the state, and it can actually cut our future allocation next year. So they actually sometimes will decrease your allocation if you don't spend your funds. Right. So that's less money to serve Yolo County homeless families across the board. So Jacqueline, I hope that answers kind of your question. I know it's not super clear as far as the date goes, but there is, it's not urgent, but there is a clock per se on the funding, and there are ramifications if we go too far.
That is exactly the type of data information that I think we are looking for. So looking for more conversations like that, I think will be beneficial to the community. And maybe I'll reach out to Jim Provenza to figure out if that's a possibility.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nolan. That was very helpful. Gives us a sense of timing too. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you so much.
Is it possible to get a copy of this recording as soon as possible?
I'm not managing that technology piece, but we can work on that.
It's necessary. We need a copy of the recording.
It will be made available, Tracy.
As soon as possible?
As soon as possible, yes.
Like within a week?
We will email you or send you the link as soon as possible. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.